The chamber was alive with frost, a cathedral of ice and fire. Light refracted through icicles like daggers suspended from the ceiling, casting sharp blue shadows across the curved walls. A circle of flame ran along the edge of a crescent-shaped tribunal table, its cold, white fire dancing above smooth, metallic glass. The fire didn't flicker, it hissed, like a restrained predator. At the curved center, 5 women stood in silence. No chains bound them, yet their freedom had long since been revoked. Behind the table sat 5 judges, machines in the shape of men, armored in black duranium, their crimson eyes pulsing with rhythm and verdict. Each turned its head in perfect synchrony, watching the women from behind sealed visors. They spoke not with mouths, but through a synthetic voice, sharp and without cadence. It echoed. You are accused of espionage, data infiltration, subversion of culture, and conspiracy to incite rebellion against the unified Galactic Empire. The tallest woman in front, Grace, lifted her chin. Her red hair had been braided tightly behind her back, those strands now fell loosely along her face. She wore a pale blue dress embroidered with tiny roses, faded by the cold. Her lips, chapped from frost, parted. We were humanitarians. Volunteers. We offered aid, food, education. You offered encryption-laced holobooks. You mapped secure tunnels. You used energy cells designed for stealth drones, interrupted the central judge, its voice lowering half a register. Your denials waste breath. Mara, standing second from the right, clenched her fists beneath her dress. Her knuckles were raw. You never asked us what we were doing. You just assumed guilt because we were human. Lila, next to Grace, touched her wrist softly. Don't, she whispered. They've already decided. It was true. The trial was theater. Broadcast to billions across the Empire, it served only to remind the galaxy what happened to those who disobeyed, defied, or defiled the Empire's order. Even on Nerix Prime, a frozen penal moon known more for execution than justice, the camera drones hovered, hungry for sensation. You were apprehended near a restricted military installation, the leftmost judge said, turning to a hollow document projected in midair. You carried a plasma regulator identical to those used by Sol-class stealth troopers. Explain. Esme, the woman with the silver blonde braid, exhaled slowly. We didn't build that equipment. You found it in wreckage from a destroyed shelter. And yet only you survived. The judge responded without hesitation. A silence settled. The Empire believed itself infallible. It ruled thousands of systems through a mixture of automation, terror, and brute technological superiority. Humanity had once resisted, decades ago, and had paid dearly. Earth had become a diplomatic ghetto. Its people scattered across neutral zones, border worlds, and refugee colonies. These 5 women had journeyed to one such zone, Yaram II, as part of a relief corps unaffiliated with any military or government. At least, that's what the Empire had believed at first. Behind the table, the flames surged higher. One judge motioned to a secondary console. A countdown began in the air. Execution, T-minus 24 hours. The screen blinked. The women were escorted, wordlessly, by 2 synthetic guards through crystalline corridors of ice and steel. No guards used words. No contact. No questions. Their cell was translucent and infused with sub-zero mist. They huddled close. Nadia, quietest of them all, finally spoke. They're not going to wait the full cycle. They'll move it forward if they sense unrest. They won't, Grace answered, tone sure. They want the spectacle. Doesn't matter, said Mara. They've given us one more night. Lila pulled her sleeve back, exposing a faded scar, a spiral symbol, like a tiny vortex. Do you think they know what this is? They're too arrogant to look twice, Esme replied, managing a faint smile. They only see civilians. They see prey, said Mara darkly. But they're not the ones who should be worried. Silence fell again, heavier this time. The women lay on the frozen floor, shivering. Each of them closed her eyes not to rest, but to remember. 3 months earlier, On a windless plain in the Earthian Free Territories, a man knelt beside Grace and taught her a coded pulse pattern: heartbeat, pause, double tap. She repeated it until it was muscle memory. Her husband, Lieutenant Marcus Hale, had served in 2 Terran Recon Shadow divisions. He knew the Empire would never stop hunting human excellence, especially those connected to special operations. "If they ever catch you," he'd said, brushing hair from her face, "don't talk. Don't run. Just wait. And when the time comes, pulse it." She had memorized the sequence. And she wasn't the only one. Mara's husband, Colburn, had designed combat algorithms that could crack Empire encryption in under 30 seconds. He taught her to use heartbeat sync as a data beacon. Esme's partner, Valen, had once escaped an Imperial cruiser with only a stolen exosuit and a sealed jaw fracture. He showed her how to hold out against sensory interrogation. Nadia's wife had been Deep Ops, never officially listed on any registry, her name burned and replaced by code. She taught Nadia to endure silence with a kind of calm that could shatter interrogators. And Lila had married the Empire's worst nightmare, a man named Jack Taurin, an orbital sniper with 1 confirmed kill on every Imperial noble family. He had made her promise one thing if she was ever taken. "Smile once," he'd said. "Just before it happens. That's how I'll know." In the cell, none of them cried. There was no terror left to drain. They had passed through the worst, the helplessness, the loneliness, the rage. What remained was readiness. Clarity. The clock dropped to 12 hours. Outside, the Empire's media machines began broadcasting pre-execution footage. Old recordings spliced to look like confessions. Mutilated data from intercepted human comms. There was even false footage of Esme dismantling an Imperial beacon. It was all digital theater, carefully edited, perfectly choreographed. Back in the ice chamber, robotic engineers checked the pyristage. It had been calibrated for dramatic effect. A ring of rising flame, followed by a slow inward burn. Enough to let the camera soak in every scream, every flinch. But when they brought the women in, something unexpected happened. They stood straighter than before. They made eye contact with the drones. And just before the synthetic guards activated the flame protocol, the women did something no one expected. They looked up. Each of them, at once, opened her mouth and breathed out a phrase. 5 different phrases, 5 exact beats, 1 shared algorithm encoded in pulse. Grace's voice. "Pattern initiate, arc break." Mara. "Unit signal 05 Zulu." Lila. "Confirm shadow flag rise." Esme. "Operator standby, phase gate." Nadia. "Target locked, uplink live." From orbit, nothing appeared to change. No ships. No signals on the Empire's sensors. Everything seemed silent. But something had shifted. High above Nerix Prime, a flicker passed through a dust storm on the moon's edge. Then another. A distortion, like a glint behind glass. One of the surveillance satellites blinked out of existence, then another. No explosions. Just absence. On the surface, the tribunal judges were preparing their ceremonial words. The lead machine spoke, voice as cold as the floor beneath the women's bare feet. "You are hereby sentenced." His armor, matte gray with no insignia, gleamed only where his breathing fog met the moon's frigid air. Behind him, 4 other teams landed simultaneously, coordinated without words, each one moving in a crescent formation toward the core facility. Each commander, Jack, Colburn, Valen, and Nadia's shadow partner, codename Riven, had memorized every detail of Nerix Prime's structure, layout, and defense posture. They'd studied it for years. Not because they were coming, but because they knew the Empire would, eventually, come for their wives. Inside the structure, chaos had no name. Drones blinked offline. Defensive AI protocols scrambled into recovery loops. In the west corridor, 2 Imperial guards stood frozen, weapons humming. Then a pulse surged through the hallway lights, and the shadows turned liquid. One guard screamed, briefly, before being pulled into nothing. The other tried to run. He didn't make it past the first bulkhead before a tranquilizer spike hit his temple. Jack Tauren didn't bother to watch him fall. His eyes, cold and calculating, were scanning the overhead vents, checking for motion sensors he'd already neutralized. "They're in Chamber 0. He whispered into his comm. "Begin room collapse sequence." From the perimeter, Valen's squad activated a sonic destabilizer at the chamber's foundation. The walls began to groan. In the execution room, cracks formed beneath the firing altar. The 5 women looked up. Grace smiled as the ceiling began to bend inward. Mara didn't smile. She crouched, eyes darting, already calculating entry paths and impact velocity. The first panel above them exploded inward. Smoke poured through the breach, followed by a compact drone that hit the floor and unfolded into a tripod stance. It scanned the women, then beeped once. "Confirmed," it said in human tongue. "Tactical extract initiating." The ceiling split open. Marcus dropped through first. He landed hard, rolling to his feet in a motion so fluid it barely seemed human. His visor retracted just long enough for Grace to see the eyes she hadn't seen in over a month. She didn't run to him. She nodded. "Right on time." He smirked. "Never missed a date." Behind him, 3 more bodies dropped through: Jack, Colburn, and Valen. Riven didn't enter the chamber. She didn't need to. She was already in the Empire's systems, rewriting everything from below. Within 47 seconds, the women were suited up, armored with lightweight kinetic mesh exofabric. The men worked in total sync, no wasted words, no hesitation. The moment they were armed, the chamber detonated from its outer wall, collapsing inward and covering their tracks in flame and dust. The team moved through secondary tunnels, old escape routes from a war the Empire had long since erased from official archives. Marcus guided them with precision, flanking every turn before the others reached it. Grace followed like a shadow, quiet, fast, and aware. Behind them, Mara moved beside Colburn. She didn't need to ask if the software was running. He answered anyway. "Virus is in. Primary command net will collapse in 90 seconds. Nadia jogged beside a blur. Riven had appeared from nowhere, black-suited, face masked. They shared a nod. No other words passed between them. Esme and Valen brought up the rear. He carried a rifle longer than his torso. She never looked back. Alarms had begun to sound again, but they were localized, fragmented. A dying system's attempt to scream into its own broken lungs. Through the corridors they moved, disabling nodes, mapping exit points, and extracting a dozen other prisoners from the walls as they passed. Civilians. Scientists. Even a young girl no older than 12, curled in the corner of a frostbitten lab. They left no one behind. Jack reached the internal command deck first. The guards there didn't fire. They hesitated, just for half a heartbeat. Enough for him to dismantle the closest one with 3 shots, each precise, each targeting exposed joints. The other fell to Marcus's sidearm, a hyperkinetic slug thrower designed for one thing: punch through kills. The terminal now belonged to Riven. She linked in with a tap. Screens flared to life. "Their feeds are hijacked," she said. "I'm in all outer sector relay stations." On a dozen planets, the public screens that had shown the women's arrest now played new footage, raw, unfiltered, and terrifying. The Empire's prize tribunal, burning. Their machines, failing. And the humans, alive. More than alive. Unstoppable. On a rim world called Talavir, a rebel cell leader watched the broadcast and smiled. "Begin uprising," she whispered. On a merchant ship in orbit around Varnes 4, an old ex-commando dropped his glass and stood. They came back. The husbands of the condemned had become executioners of the unjust. Valen activated a second protocol, orbital assault denial. It blocked every ship attempting to enter or leave the system for 12 minutes. That was all they needed. Back in the core, the remaining judges of the tribunal tried to flee through a secondary hangar. But the doors were fused. Then they heard it. Not the sound of an army. The sound of footsteps. Heavy. Singular. Relentless. General Vraxer stood waiting in his command vault, flanked by 2 mechanized war guards, his body augmented with obsidian armor laced with thermal flares. He was twice the size of a man, and 3 times more arrogant. When Marcus, Grace, Mara, and Jack entered, he didn't move. "I gave you mercy," he said, voice thick with distortion. "You were warned." "Wrong," Grace replied. "We were used. You cannot threaten the Empire." "We're not here to threaten," Mara said. "We're here to end." Vraxer surged forward. The battle was fast, but not clean. Marcus took the first blow. His ribs cracked beneath the impact, but he rolled and returned fire at close range. Jack dove to the left, unloading 2 EM darts into one of the war guards. It collapsed, spasming. Vraxer reached Mara. She didn't run. She ducked beneath his strike, drew a vibroblade, and stabbed into the joint of his augmented knee. Sparks exploded. Grace leapt over a railing and tackled him from behind, shoving a shock baton into the neural jack at the base of his neck. He roared, but it was Colburn who finished it. He dropped from the ceiling. Unseen. A ghost. 1 shot. A compressed rail round between the general's eyes. Silence fell. Then Grace walked to the body, knelt, and whispered, "No one burns us and lives." Outside, the snow began to fall harder. Smoke rose from the melting ice fields. Their job was not done. The team exfiltrated, leaving no trace but destruction. The last prisoners were placed aboard a stealth corvette. The women were first aboard, but none sat down until the team was accounted for. As the ship lifted, the facility below imploded, silently, in on itself, collapsing into a crater of glass and ash. In orbit, Empire defense satellites blinked, and then exploded, one after another. The message had already reached every world. You took our wives. We took your myth. And replaced it with fear. On the bridge, Marcus sat beside Grace, their shoulders touching. "You think they'll come for revenge?" she asked quietly. "They don't know how," he answered. "Not anymore." She leaned her head against him. And in that moment, surrounded by ghosts, scars, and ash, humanity became something new again, not just a race of survivors, but a force the galaxy would never forget.